Screenshots are all over the internet right now of her exchanging gifts and inappropriate text messages with a 15-year-old. Candace Owens is losing her shit, and her own employees are getting fired for asking questions.
There are moments when someone with no political stake in a story looks at the evidence and reacts with pure, unfiltered human instinct. No agenda, no side to protect, no brand to defend. Just a person looking at documented facts and responding to what they see. In this chapter of the story, that person appears to be Joe Rogan. According to people who were present or close to the situation, when Rogan reviewed the material, Candace Owens had assembled the screenshots, the timelines, the Epstein file connections, the Romanian orphanage work, the Belfast recruitment announcement, and the long stretches of coordinated silence. His reaction was not political. It wasn't ideological either. It was visceral. He reportedly said, "This woman is connected to every demon in the industry. She's crazy. Good job, Candace." That reaction mattered. Not because Joe Rogan is the final authority on anything, but because someone with his reach and his reputation for independent thinking looked at the same evidence and responded with genuine alarm. No partisan motivation, no media battle to win. And that suggests something important. What Candace Owens assembled appears to cross a threshold that goes far beyond conservative versus liberal, beyond team versus team, beyond media feuds. This isn't just a petty dispute inside conservative media. It isn't about who controls the TPUSA brand or who gets credit for Charlie Kirk's legacy. Because once you see everything laid out together, once you follow the full thread from a teenage girl's tweets in 2013 all the way to Epstein's DOJ files and a recruitment trip to Belfast, one question keeps surfacing, a question that no one with a clear conscience can easily dismiss. And strangely, almost nobody is connecting all of these pieces together yet. So let's go back to the very beginning and walk through it in the exact order it actually happened. The year is 2013. Erika Kirk has just completed her run as Miss Arizona. She is 25 years old, polished, well-connected, and actively building her brand within conservative media and political pipeline circles. She has a public profile, a growing following, and a platform that gives her real influence over the people around her. Then, on the evening of September 15th that year, documented through publicly archived social media posts, Erika crosses paths with a 15-year-old girl named Jillian Falcon. At first glance, what develops between them might seem harmless to many adults. Jillian is simply a teenager who admires an older, glamorous woman. She tweets about how pretty Erika is. She calls her a woman crush. On its own, that might seem completely unremarkable. But as you'll soon see, that moment was only the beginning of a much larger story.
Exchange is actually in reference to Erika then having sent this 15-year-old to have photos taken. Insane. She sent this 15-year-old to have photos taken. She's helping her because she's just so beautiful.
Teenagers often admire adults they see as inspiring, successful, or attractive. That's completely normal. It's a common part of growing up, and on its own, it doesn't raise any red flags. But that's not where this story becomes important. The real question is what happens next. What happens when the adult, a 25-year-old woman with a public title, influence, and a growing platform chooses to engage with that admiration instead of keeping a clear and professional distance? In situations involving minors, the responsibility of the adult is very clear. When a teenager looks up to an adult, there are only a few appropriate responses. The adult can ignore it, maintain respectful distance, or if there is genuine mentorship involved, communicate through proper channels with parental awareness and consent. What responsible adults don't do is step into that admiration and encourage it privately. They don't move the interaction away from public spaces and into private conversations where there is no accountability. Yet, according to screenshots that later circulated, widely reviewed and discussed online by thousands of people and analyzed by Candace Owens, that's reportedly what happened in this case. The interaction between Erika and Jillian didn't remain on public Twitter. According to the timeline, Erika's account eventually went private, while Jillian's remained public. And the things Jillian continued posting began to hint at conversations that were happening behind the scenes. At times, Jillian posted messages like, "Thank you, Erika, for making my whole week." Comments like that often suggest there's more going on privately conversations where the adult on the other side is saying things that make a teenager feel noticed, valued, and emotionally special. Then there were the messages themselves. One alleged exchange shows Erika writing something along the lines of, "Let me call you. Hold on, sweetheart. Give me a sex." The message was reportedly corrected afterward, with a claim that it was meant to say second, followed by a joking comment suggesting it was just autocorrect. Even if someone gives the most generous possible interpretation to that moment, it's still difficult to explain why a message like that would appear in a private late-night conversation with a 15-year-old. Normally, if an adult accidentally sends something inappropriate to a minor, The response is simple. Correct the mistake and end the conversation. What typically doesn't happen is turning it into a joke and continuing the exchange. According to those reviewing the messages, the tone of the follow-up suggested someone who was comfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Then came the compliments. Screenshots allegedly show Erika telling Jillian things like how beautiful she was, complimenting her eyes, her lips, and her skin. Very specific, very personal comments about appearance. Researchers who study manipulative dynamics in youth-facing environments often point to this as a common early tactic, making a young person feel uniquely admired, specially noticed, and emotionally chosen. There's even a term often used to describe this pattern: love bombing. It refers to overwhelming someone with attention, praise, and validation in order to quickly build emotional trust and dependency. The intention isn't simply kindness. The intention is influence. The more a young person depends on that attention and approval, the more control the adult in the relationship can gain. Then things reportedly escalated further. According to posts Jillian shared, Erika allegedly sent her a Valentine's message containing explicit language. At that point, many observers felt the situation crossed a line that was difficult to interpret any other way. There is no obvious context that would make messages like that appropriate in communication between an adult and a minor. And the relationship reportedly didn't stop at online conversations. Erika is said to have sent Jillian a birthday gift to her home address, which meant the interaction had moved beyond public social media and private messages into real-world contact. A package delivered directly to a teenager's house. Everything up to this point had already raised serious questions. But the detail that surfaced next is what reportedly made many people stop and look at the situation differently, because it suggested that the texts, the compliments, the Valentine's messages, even the advice about drinking water and avoiding salty food so she wouldn't look bloated, might all have been building towards something very specific. At first, people assumed that advice meant the two were planning to meet somewhere, maybe an event, maybe a public appearance. But according to the timeline that followed, that assumption turned out to be wrong. And what the messages were actually leading toward raised even more questions.
The American people deserve to have every Epstein file released with no redactions whatsoever, period.
Many people have argued that the American public deserves to see every file connected to the Epstein case released without redactions. That debate continues. But in the middle of this broader discussion, another detail began drawing attention. According to accounts that later surfaced, Erika allegedly arranged for a 15-year-old girl, someone she had reportedly only met once in person, to attend a photo shoot with a male photographer who was said to be a friend of hers. Jillian later described what she remembered about that photographer. She said he made her feel uncomfortable. She remembered that his name started with the letter R. She recalled that he was shorter and heavier in build. Most importantly, she remembered going to that photo shoot alone. There was no parent present, no guardian, no adult she trusted, just a 15-year-old girl sent to meet a photographer she didn't know. According to the timeline being discussed online, the arrangement came from a 25-year-old woman who had already been communicating privately with the teenager, sending compliments about her appearance, offering advice about how to look her best, and maintaining ongoing contact. Yet throughout this entire process, one absence stands out. According to those examining the messages and timeline, Erika reportedly never contacted Jillian's mother. Not once. No phone call, no text message, no email, nothing. And for many observers, that absence raised serious questions. In situations involving minors, parents exist for a reason. Their knowledge and consent form the boundary that separates appropriate adult mentorship from something far more concerning. Bypassing that boundary isn't a minor detail. For many people following the story, it looked like a key part of how the situation allegedly unfolded. When Candace Owens later looked more closely into Jillian's background and living circumstances at the time, another layer of the story began to emerge. At that point in her life, Jillian was reportedly living in a trailer park located in an area that had been identified locally as having significant problems with child exploitation and trafficking. She was also growing up without a father in the home. In other words, she was a young teenager in a vulnerable situation, limited financial stability, a single-parent household, and a community environment where the exploitation of young people had been reported as an ongoing issue. Jillian herself later confirmed parts of this information when it was brought to her attention. She acknowledged details about her living situation, her neighborhood, and the absence of her father during that time in her life. According to Candace Owens, Erika was reportedly aware of many of these factors. She had Jillian's home address. She had mailed a birthday gift there. Public social media posts clearly indicated Jillian's age. Every element that made Jillian vulnerable, her youth, her environment, and her personal circumstances would have been visible. Yet according to those analyzing the timeline, none of those factors appeared to slow the interactions that were allegedly taking place. In fact, Researchers who study predatory behavioral patterns often note that individuals seeking to exploit others sometimes identify and approach people they perceive as vulnerable. As screenshots connected to Jillian's story circulated online, people began looking more closely at Erika Kirk's broader career path. What they discovered was a professional history that repeatedly placed her in environments involving young people. Her background included work connected to orphan programs overseas, youth-focused nonprofit efforts, and political recruitment networks targeting college-age audiences. Her activities reportedly extended across several countries, including Romania, China, and Costa Rica, often through charitable or nonprofit initiatives that involved working with young people. To be clear, millions of people dedicate their careers to youth work in ethical and meaningful ways. Programs supporting vulnerable children and teenagers can change lives for the better, and the vast majority of people involved in that work are committed to helping others. That reality is important to acknowledge. However, investigative journalists and researchers have also documented a difficult truth. Individuals who intend to exploit vulnerable populations sometimes place themselves in positions that give them legitimate access. By presenting themselves as helpers, mentors, or aid workers, they gain proximity that would otherwise be impossible. The environments offering the most access are often the environments they deliberately seek out. And this is where some observers began asking more questions. Public records did not appear to show Erika having formal academic training in social services, trauma work, or international humanitarian programs, qualifications typically expected for people working directly with trafficking victims or vulnerable youth in multiple countries. Yet, according to reports, she had been placed in roles involving contact with those very populations. That raised a series of unanswered questions. Who approved her for that work? Who opened those doors? And who decided she was qualified to operate in environments involving vulnerable young people overseas? Publicly available information hasn't fully answered those questions. Later in her career, Erika reportedly moved into a completely different field working for a luxury real estate company in New York City. On the surface, it seemed like an unusual shift from pageantry, conservative media, and international charity work into high-end real estate. But what caught people's attention wasn't just the career change. The company she worked for appeared numerous times in documents related to the Epstein investigation. According to records discussed online, the firm's name appeared more than 100 times in files connected to the Department of Justice's case involving Epstein. Several emails referenced properties connected to Epstein that had been listed or handled by the firm. The company was also involved in the sale of Epstein's Palm Beach mansion after his death, one of the most well-known properties tied to the case. Other documents reference figures associated with Epstein's social and business network. These connections have been widely discussed but remain complex, and many details have never been fully explained in public. And for people already following the earlier parts of the story, those overlapping threads only raise more questions about how all of these pieces might fit together. And then there is a detail that stopped people cold. According to the DOJ files, the Corcoran Group's listed president during this period was not Pamela Lehman. It was Linda Rothschild, one of the most prominent figures in international elite circles, connected to political power across the Atlantic, a name that appears repeatedly in discussions surrounding Epstein's networks. To be absolutely clear, and this is critical, there are no public court documents proving Erika Kirk was personally involved in Epstein's trafficking. That must be stated plainly. What the evidence shows is something different, but still deeply significant. It paints a picture built from a series of documented connections, adjacencies that individually might seem explainable, but together form a pattern that demands attention. A woman allegedly groomed a 15-year-old. In 2013, she reportedly arranged a private photographer session for that minor without parental knowledge or consent. She worked inside orphanages and trafficking victim programs across multiple countries, despite lacking documented professional credentials. She later took a position at a real estate firm whose name appears 108 times in Epstein's DOJ files. Her supervisor at that firm appears in those same files in connection with an NDA for an Epstein property sale. And the firm had direct ties to one of the most prominent names in Epstein's network. Here is the connection that reportedly shocked people. Erika's Romanian Angels initiative aligns directly with repeated mentions of Romania in Epstein's documents. Romania appears not as incidental background, but as a specific operational reference. In the Epstein files, there are emails where Epstein asks, "Did you find the Romanian girl?" Another in 2010 asks, "What languages does the Romanian girl speak?" References in 2011 discuss a Romanian girl in the context of redacted documents. Hundreds of Romania references appear throughout. The specific city of Constanța, where Erika's Romanian Angels project allegedly operated, also appears. Now, this does not in itself prove operational connection. Romania has legitimate charity work and documented trafficking vulnerabilities. But the combination of factors is what makes this significant. Erika's charity, military partnerships in Romania, the colonel she publicly thanked who was later accused of misconduct, the lack of professional credentials, her position at a firm appearing 108 times in Epstein's files, and Romania appearing in both her operational history and in Epstein's documented communications. When Epstein's emails ask about specific Romanian girls, their locations, their languages, and the city matches the one where Erika's charity operated, it creates a serious investigative question, one that requires subpoena power and full document access to answer. Meanwhile, Erika announced recruitment trips to Belfast and other parts of Europe. The stated purpose: recruiting young people aged 15 to 25, the exact age range that included Jillian at the time of the alleged 2013 interactions. International recruitment of teenagers into a political organization whose finances were under IRS investigation, whose founder ordered a financial audit before his death, and whose leadership allegedly paid influencers to attack journalists documenting these connections. Belfast itself carries historical weight, a city scarred by 30 years of sectarian violence, religious extremism, and systemic radicalization of young people through institutional manipulation. The historical parallels critics draw are uncomfortable and deliberate. Erika Kirk's response to all of this? Silence. She did not deny the messages. She did not explain the screenshot. She did not address the Corcoran Group's 108 appearances in Epstein's files, her qualifications for working with trafficking victims, the Romanian connections, the Constanța reference, or the photographer Jillian described as creepy. She said nothing, and then announced a European recruitment trip. That silence, in the context of this paper trail, speaks louder than any statement she could release. Organizations with nothing to hide provide transparency. They answer questions directly, counter allegations with evidence, engage openly. The people who go silent are the ones for whom transparency does not serve their interests. Internally, silence was reportedly enforced as well. Multiple TPUSA employees who asked questions about Erika Kirk, the Jillian screenshots, or the Epstein file connections were reportedly fired or pushed out. Charlie Kirk, before his death, publicly demanded transparency, calling for the full release of Epstein files without redaction, connecting Epstein to intelligence networks and compromised systems of power. He even ordered a financial audit of his organization. Now, the organization he built and the woman who controls it is reportedly doing the opposite, silencing questions, blocking transparency, and responding to documented evidence with coordinated paid attacks instead of honest answers. Two realities exist here, and both must be acknowledged. First, everything documented could be part of a sophisticated campaign to destroy the reputation of an innocent person. Screenshots could be fabricated. Corcoran connections could be coincidental. Romanian parallels could be circumstantial. Erika could be a target, not a perpetrator. And Candace Owens could be assembling misleading evidence designed to take down a political figure. That possibility exists and must be acknowledged. Second, much of what we see online is real. Jillian is real. The screenshots have not been debunked. The Corcoran Group appears 108 times in public Epstein files. Romanian connections are real and specific. Whistleblower firings, paid influencer campaigns, and organizational silence are documented. Joe Rogan saw the assembled evidence and reacted with visceral alarm. The reason this story will not die is simple. The paper trail is real. Every connection, every piece of evidence, and every documented silence tells a story that continues to unfold. The coordinated attempts to suppress it confirm, with every dollar spent and every scripted attack deployed, that the answer to the next question is something they absolutely cannot afford for the public to discover.